What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 693. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how's your week been?
Oh, it's been great. Had a pretty fun week of drafting. Really enjoying this whole Shadows Remastered thing.
You're like really enjoying it, right?
Oh yeah, I'm going pretty hard on it. It just hits a lot of the notes that I really like about draft, and the changing things up week by week has been really cool too.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it. This week I like even better than the last, but I have been diving in and really enjoying the format too. It feels like they've got something on their hands here. You know, we've had remastered sets, and I think that, you know, if done carefully, like this one seems to have been, you can really get a nice balance, but quite a bit more powerful format, you know, than an average draft, let's say, right? Like there's some heavy hitters, the rarity changes, and picking the best cards from both sets, you know, helps elevate that a little bit, and you can feel it. It feels like you've got some pretty powerful, cool stuff going on in the format. We're going to be talking about two of our favorite decks, especially for this week. This week on the show from Shadows Over Innistrad Remastered. That's going to be blue-red spells and blue-green clues. And those decks are always kind of good, but they're really good this week, with flashback spells being the highlighted bonus sheet stuff. So that's what we're going to dive into on the show this week. First, though, Luis, we got to talk sponsors.
Yes. So TCG Player is moving away from doing a straight-up sponsorship, just across the board. If you listen to Lords Limited, you're going to have heard them say the same thing. So as a result, they're no longer sponsoring LR. They're doing more affiliate-based stuff, which we don't feel is like the right fit for the podcast, just as the straight-up deal. So we're now, you know, kind of going to regroup and figure out what we want to do with regard to sponsorship. But currently, the show isn't sponsored by anyone, actually. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah, and we did want to say thank you to everybody at Channel Fireball and TCG Player for supporting the show for so long and for a great partnership. You know, we wish them all the best luck going forward. And we really appreciate the good years we had there with them as our sponsor. They were really good to us, and we're gonna figure it out. Great relationship, and you know, we're onwards and upwards. That's right. And as Luis mentioned, him and I have been having some phone calls and talks, just kind of figuring out what the next step is as far as sponsorship goes. Obviously, we want to be careful and make sure that we land in a good place. So we'll figure that out and let you know, as always, when that happens. In the meantime, never been more important. The show is brought to you by you via the Patreon. I've mentioned it before, you know, that it's kind of the backbone of the show. And this is why, right, is that like there's a level of consistency there. And it's a direct connection between our listener base and us, you know, with just the intermediary being Patreon there. So first off, we just want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon at times like this. It really means extra, and we really do appreciate it. If you'd like to support us, it's patreon.com/limited resources. If you sign up, you get a thank you card in the mail, as well as an LR sticker you can put on your water bottle, your laptop, or window, or whatever. And we really do, again, appreciate each and every person who supports us via Patreon. One of the cool benefits that you get is you get access to the Patreon feed, which probably doesn't sound like that much, but it is where we ask questions to our audience and get the questions for the question of the week show, or the Q&A shows that we do every set cycle. Luis and I look forward to those. Those are the ones where we open it up to, you know, kind of any topic, really. I mean, Magic is definitely plays, but in non-Magic stuff too. And we really have a lot of fun with those. But I also put up the question of the month, the Patreon question of the week thread every few months. And we've got one here from Simon who says, "Hi guys, I'm following a Facebook page called The Limited of Poland." And he says, big shout out to the guys running it. So shout out to Limited of Poland Facebook page. Besides info about Polish MTG events, links to interesting content, etc., followers will post their arena trophy decks there. Often there are a lot of cards there, which I don't prioritize while drafting. I would like to ask you, how do you approach this kind of information? I know it's not 17 lands data, but can I use these deck lists somehow to get better at Magic? Thanks for the show and take care. Simon. Thanks, Simon. Great question. This is something that you'll see on the subreddit and on, various limited discords and stuff is, people will post their trophy decks. Is that useful to you, Luis? Like when you look at those, do you try to find a trend or what do you see from those?
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned it, our Pro Tour testing team Discord, we have a channel that's just trophy decks. We have
Mhm.
we basically have two limited discussion channels. One is general limited discussion. The other is trophy decks. And it's not to say that a 2-1 deck and a 3-0 deck are like worlds different or anything like that. But in order to kind of keep it at a reasonable level of people posting, we've decided let's just take a look at all the 3-0 decks and just, kind of see what you can glean from that. And as it turns out, you can get quite a bit from it. The main thing I like to look at when you look at those is what are any outliers or things that stand out to me. Because look, 17 lands is going to be a lot better for figuring out whether like galvanic bombardment is better than strength of arms or whatever comparison you want to make. You're not going to get that by looking at deck lists. But if you look at a trophy deck, for example, I'm going to talk about blue red spells later. If I'd posted 3 of those decks, actually I just post 2 on Twitter, you can look and be like, wow, this deck has literal 0 creatures and this other deck has 3. So you can actually build that style of deck. That's pretty crazy. I didn't realize you could do that. And that's the sort of thing that is really useful to learn. And by looking at these trophy decks, you can see what's been working for other people. Not to say you're going to get like a ton of, groundbreaking stuff out of it, but more data can be good and it is useful to look at.
Yeah, I think the two things that I think about when I see decks like that are I'm trying to take a macro approach to it. So I'm looking at things like what Luis mentioned. Oh, wow, these decks have, this is an extreme version with almost no creatures. That's possible. Okay, that's great. Another thing would be like the curves of the decks that people are posting. Man, that thing has a lot of 1 and 2 drops. Hey, that next one did too. Hey, that next one did too. Like this format is skewing cheaper, not more expensive. And you can, because especially if they're posted in mana value order, your brain can start just looking at a limited deck after having played on Magic Online and Arena for all these years. You just sort of have a like snapshot where you're like, oh wow, that curve is really low. That curve's in the middle. That's actually got a lot of 4 drops and 5 drops, more than you'd think, that type of thing. So I try to take away those big picture things. The other side of the coin, right, is to keep yourself in check. It's one data point. Right? It's one data point. The person could have gotten very lucky. Sometimes you look at those decks a little deeper and you're like, you have 8 uncommons for this archetype, like that all fit right in there. And you just, you had a really good draft. It came together for you, but that probably won't be repeatable very often. And, so you have to really use your intuition to determine whether this is a good data point and then what to take from it. And what I would say is you should never, ever take too much from any one data point. Like that's a good way to go down a wrong path for a while. And then you have to like drag yourself back and get back on the correct path at some point because you made assumptions based off of, such a small data set. That said, you can learn something from it. It's also just interesting. Right. I mean, a lot of the thing that why we do this podcast and why we all find limited so fascinating is just because there's an exploratory nature to it where you're like, well, I'm going to try something or I'm going to push the boundaries and it's just fun to look at other people's lists and say, wow, you got a trophy with that, or man, that deck was great. There's like a social aspect to it too. So that part you just get for free and it's just fun. So don't forget that part too, is that it's just interesting to look at other people's lists. The only pitfall that you can come from is if you say, look, somebody posted a list on Reddit and that's a real deck and I'm going to start drafting it or forcing it. That's where you can get yourself into some trouble. Great question, Simon. Thanks for being a patron and thanks for the question as well. Let's do a crack-a-pack, Luis, for Shadows Over Innistrad Remastered. Now, we mentioned this and we'll dive deeper into it, but the bonus sheet has shifted over to the next one. So the one last week was tribal-based cards and now it's flashback cards. So again, we're going to go deeper on that, but it's worth noting that if the format is going to change, right, that would be a big shift, right? Tribal and flashback just don't touch each other. Like there's no overlap there. So, that's something that we're going to talk about on the show here too. So here's our crack-a-pack. First card out is Explosive Apparatus. That's the 1 mana artifact that you can pay 3 tap it and sack it to do 2 damage to anything. Is the only reason to play this for Delirium?
Yeah, it's a Delirium enabler is basically the only thing that's going on with that. And I am not a fan of it. I try to avoid it. Terrarian is the way you want to go with this. So
get your card back. You can sacrifice it and still get your card. It still is an artifact. By the way, Delirium, I found it quite difficult. Like I have not been I have downgraded cards that are like, well, if it has Delirium, then it's really good. And if it doesn't, it's kind of medium. I'm like, I probably won't have Delirium unless I really consciously push for it.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that when I talk about the Delirium deck this week.
Okay.
It is it's a tough nut to crack, and it's one of the more like if you were to rate each deck on like, you know, how beginner, intermediate, advanced, Delirium is an advanced deck. Like
definitely
that is a deck that is hard to kind of get to exactly where you want to be with it. So certainly a lot of thoughts on Delirium. I think it's good, but it is tricky to manage, and it's not where I would start, especially if you're kind of newish to the format.
Strength of Arms is kind of the opposite. It's white for an instant. Creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and if you control an equipment, you get a 1/1 human.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good card. It's actually got a pretty reasonable win rate overall, just because 1 mana for +2/+2 is usually going to trade up in mana, and it sometimes gets you a 1/1. These decks do tend to have equipment, though. Butcher's Cleaver did just get rotated out, so that's actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah, Thraben Foulbloods. This is the 2 and a black 3/2 with Delirium. It gets +1/+1 and Menace if you've got Delirium.
Yeah, this is not a Delirium card I play. Like this is a card I would only play if you literally were like, well, I want to play a 3 mana 3/2, and that's it. Yep. There's really nothing else to the card.
Yeah, because when you play the Delirium deck, it's rarely to to give yourself an advantage on like some aggro theme. Guardian of Pilgrims. This is the 1 and a white 2/2. When it ETBs, you give a creature +1/+1 until end of turn. It's been good.
This is a fine card for any white aggro deck. It's a spirit, so it can be nice with like Spectral Shepherd, where you like bounce it and replay it, that sort of thing. But not a card I'm going to heavily prioritize.
Yeah, it's classified as a playable 2-drop. Next is Weirded Vampire. This is the 3 and a black 3/3 with Madness for 2 and a black.
This got a little weaker now that Stormkirk Captain is no longer in the rotation, but it's still a strong card. In the Red Black Madness deck, it's 3 mana 3/3 draw card in some forms. Like when you discard this, because now we got Faithless Looting. Actually, that is a good addition for this deck. When you discard this to Faithless Looting, then it is like you drew a card, right? Because you discard it to pay for a cost. When you're discarding it to Olivia's Dragoons just kind of out of nowhere, that's not as much, but either way, it's still pretty good for that deck.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go to first pick of this in this current draft format. I would much rather take the Enablers if I was going to go down that route. But it's a card you could take.
Dawngryff is the 2 and a white 2/2 flyer. It is a non-relevant creature type. It's a hippogriff.
Yeah, this one's kind of like without a home. It doesn't really have a place.
Yeah.
Like it's not a human for the human decks. It's not a spirit, which is really critical. If it was a spirit, it'd be a lot more appealing.
Yeah.
It's still playable in the spirit deck, but it's just not what you're excited about.
No, it gets for a card that actually fits into the format reasonably, it gets downgraded to filler pretty quickly because of its lack of affiliation.
I mean, this is a powerful draft format. You really have to keep in mind, like this is quite a bit more powerful than Shadows was, Shadows Eldritch Moon was before, and certainly more powerful than like the average draft format that you've come to expect when you play against. So Don't think 3 mana 2/2 flyer, which is already kind of behind the curve when it comes to actual drafts, is the kind of card you want to play.
That's right. Yeah, and I'll tell you, Swift Spinner has something to say about it. That's the 3 and a green 2/3 flash reach. But unfortunately, since Dawngryff isn't good, Swift Spinner isn't really either.
No, just not really a playable card.
No.
I will say this. As we get to Delirium, we're going to see it a little bit more. But in the Delirium decks now, because Spider Spawning and Knot of the Bone are in the format, you are going to want to up your creature count. And I've played a lot of kind of junky green and blue creatures as a result.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Because to me, what you said, it's interesting. You actually fit right into what I was going to say, except for in the opposite way, which is that normally cards like this, even though you could see spots where it could be okay, right? It can do a thing, but you need synergy. Like most of the decks are synergy based. They're tribal or they care about Delirium or Graveyard or Clues or spells or whatever. And Swift Spinner just doesn't fit into any of those. It's non-tribal and it doesn't. So it ends up being like way out.
Non-tribal, low power level, low synergy.
Yes, it is all of those things. But you somehow found the one way that it does or can occasionally fit into a deck. And that's because it's a creature and it's green and you need those in spider spawning, and it acts as a synergy card there, which is pretty funny. But as we mentioned, you'd prefer other options.
I mean, I got to say this format more than basically any is like, you got to have a plan, know what your plan is. Don't play off plan cards. And sometimes your plan does literally involve, I need a 14th creature so my other cards work. And I think that's totally fine, but know what you're doing when you're putting this card in your deck, and mostly don't put the card in your deck. Yeah,
and these last two cards are the perfect examples of that, but it is worth noting that the bar is quite high, right? Good example would be Thraben Foulbloods, right? Hey, it says Delirium on it, so maybe you'd think, well, I could put it in my Delirium deck, but it even doesn't quite make the cut in that type of deck. The type of cards that actually do are cards like Weirded Vampire, even though that looks super boring, right? You end up with a 3/3, and sometimes you only pay 3 mana for it, but it ends up being a staple or a card that you see quite often because Madness is so well supported, and you need those type of cards. Next one, Gatstaff Arsonist. This is the 4 and a red 5/4 werewolf, and it flips into a 6/5 something. I can't remember.
It's a playable card if you're a deck that wants a 5-drop. It's barely even a werewolf in terms of like, it doesn't really synergize that much with the other werewolf stuff. Like, no, I've lost the card. It's big.
Me too. Yeah. I mean,
it's not that exciting.
Right. But this one does meet the bar for being a werewolf, a playable werewolf. And so if you have, the werewolf removal spell or the howl, whatever that flips all of them, or the enchantment that pumps them and gives them trample, like you want this in your deck. It will make the cut if you need, a 5-ball. Next is
Moonmist is gone for what it's worth, but Howlpack Resurgence is not, and neither is Moonlit Hunt. So yes, you do have some werewolf build arounds.
So Hunt is still in, and Resurgence is still in. Okay, good to know. Fogwalker is our last common. That's the 1 in a blue 1/3 with Skulk. It is a spirit, and when it ETBs, it locks down a creature for just an untapped step.
And note, I learned this: it doesn't tap it down; it just keeps it tapped down.
Keeps it tapped. Yeah.
Which is a pretty big difference. Like, that's a meaningful difference that you would not necessarily expect, because a lot of these cards, like almost no cards do this. Most of them tap and lock down.
Yes. I think the problem is that they wanted a 2-drop and it would be too good if it just froze a creature for only 2.
None of these cards are none of these. The only time I played this card was in my triple ongoing investigation mono blue clues deck.
There you go. So this is interesting because we're through all the commons now, and they all kind of stink. Like, there is not a single card here that I'm excited about. I think Weirded Vampire or Gatstaff Arsonist has the highest upside, but like, those are really not exciting picks. So we're kind of leaning on the...
We just know we're not going to take any of these cards.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to have to find something better.
No sequence of cards in the rest of the pack that wouldn't lead us to taking one of them.
That's right. So the next card is Neglected Heirloom. This is the 1 mana equipment. This is uncommon, of course. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. And when equipped creature transforms, you transform the heirloom, and its equip cost is 1. And I can't remember what it is on the other side.
+3/+3 in first strike.
Okay. So what do you think?
Not a card I'm interested in taking either.
And I guess you can tell by the fact that I couldn't remember what it did on the other side that I probably don't take it very highly.
Well, we knew that you wouldn't be playing this card.
Yeah, no, not at all. This to me also, this does have the hallmarks of kind of a win more. Like, if you're ever transforming a card, you're usually doing pretty good, right? Like, the cards don't get worse when you transform them. And so the idea of putting more eggs into that basket, like, a good way to frame this would be, if I have a card that's threatening to transform, it is a likely removal target. Like, my opponent's not going to want me to do that. And so now I'm going to, spend a card and a couple of mana to put this Neglected Heirloom on and kind of cross my fingers that I actually get to do it. And then they kill it. And it's like, I was already going to be ahead. So this just feels like it's, another egg to throw in a basket that doesn't need it.
Yeah, I'm not really high on it. I mean, there might be some kind of deck that has a bunch of easy to flip cards that is not this, but that's not where I'd be looking.
Yeah. Forsaken Sanctuary. This is the black-white dual landed ETBs tapped. Boy, we're kind of running out of runway here, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, we are getting to the point where like you're going to have to take one of these cards, but hopefully, again, still not this.
Can I interest you in a Dusk Feaster? This is the 5 black,
No,
black,
absolutely
4/5 line. It's got Delirium. It costs 2 less.
See, this is another one of those oddballs where, like, yes, if you go through the jump through the hoops, you do the quest, you get 3 black, black, 4/5 flyer. That's not even a card I would be that excited about in this format. It's just straight
fine.
up.
Yeah, it's just okay.
So
I would play it if it was always 5.
I guess I'm on the black white land right now, but I'm not happy about it.
This is getting awkward. Our what is it called? Spell, but whatever. The bonus sheet card is Rally the Peasants. This is the 2 and a white instant. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn, and you can flash it back for 2 and a red.
I mean,
it's powerful, but does it really have a home in this format? Like,
yeah, I don't really know where this is supposed to go. If you could make a lot of spirit tokens or something, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not planning on doing too much rallying, so I guess we're hoping on the rare here.
All right, our rare is Tamio's Journal, 5 mana legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, investigate. So you just get a clue every upkeep, and then you can tap this thing and sack 3 clues to search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, and then shuffle.
I don't think this is very good either.
I don't either. And I love the clues deck. In fact, I'm going to be talking about it on the show this week. But I'll tell you, little spoiler alert, getting the clues isn't the hard part. And this is a very slow way to get, I mean, this clearly gives you inevitability, right? Like if you have the board locked up and you stick this thing, it's kind of difficult to deal with as an artifact, and it'll just sit there and spit out an extra card for you every turn effectively. At some point, you crack enough clues that you've hit extra land drops and it becomes sort of free and you're just drawing 2 cards a turn. And that will win you the game at some point. So there is something enticing about this. But if this is meant to be in the clues deck, which the activated ability makes you think, it's not really, like, that's not the problem. So it just doesn't, like, for 5 mana, and it does stone nothing most of the time. The first turn you cast it, you say go. Your opponent hopefully doesn't kill you. Turn comes back to you. Now you dump in 2 more mana and get your first card. You're 7 mana in for your first payoff. Again, the idea is that over the long term, this will win you the game. But sometimes, you know, people put pressure on you, and it's not that easy. So this pack is really bad. Like, I would be pretty bummed about this one. Yeah. I think I would lean towards the Journal or the Rally, like the last 2 cards that we had. They just seem to have the highest upside out of anything, and I can live with it if I don't play them.
I guess if we're being honest, I'd take Tamio's Journal and just try to verify for myself that it is in fact not a very good card, because I think that's Reed land.
Do you think that there's a world? So I just put it in the context of the Clues deck, but what if it's not? Like, what if it just is your finisher in like a, I don't know, pick 2 colors control deck or a 3-color control deck? I
just think it's too slow. 5 mana artifact that costs 2 a turn to draw a card. I mean, and yeah, it is kind of nice that if you don't want to spend the mana on drawing a card that turn, it kind of saves up for later and still kind of sticks around. Mm-hmm. But this isn't a card I'm excited about. No way.
I agree. I would take it here though, but I mean, honestly, I would be willing to bail on it. I wouldn't be shocked if it didn't make it into my main. Yeah, I just don't want to first pick a weirded vampire or like an arsonist or a fogwalker or something. Like, I'm just like, I don't know. Those just have almost no upside. They're all effectively filler in their respective decks, and they really only go in their respective decks. So it's like, it's kind of the worst of both worlds, right? You're like, in my best case scenario, I've got a C. Right. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I figure something with Journal, you know, I might be able to make it work. Or like you said, I could learn something from it, and maybe that's enough. But
you get bad packs sometimes.
Yeah.
It's the way of the world.
There you go.
I did want to mention something that I think we maybe could have touched on earlier, that there's a Showdown tomorrow.
How did I miss that? Didn't you put it in like the
I put
biggest?
it in literally 30-point font.
I think you put it in font that was too big. Like you overpowered.
We loop back around. So I want to touch on this for two reasons. The first is, well, there's a showdown tomorrow. Awesome. We're going to play Shadows Over Innistrad Remastered against the Lords of the Limited. Ethan, Ben, and then of course Cord, Yumi, and BK.
Heard of them, but that sounds interesting.
It is also the format of the Arena Open, which is this weekend. So you got lots of days of Magic. So, and while Team Draft isn't exactly what it's going to look like, you're still going to see us play with all these cards, and you're going to get kind of a handle on what's going on. The other is that we have no intention to stop doing the showdowns, even though neither of us is sponsored by the same website or anything like that. And I mean, I'm going to go ahead and speak for you, Marshall, without even talking to you beforehand. Regardless of who they or we get sponsored by, if we even do, that's not going to stop us from doing this. This is a fun thing. We all like to do it. And we have no plans of stopping.
Yeah. And we also have no plans of stopping winning, even though we did stop for the last two drafts
We did.
Abruptly.
We still got a somewhat comfortable lead, but it's just becoming a little less comfortable.
Yeah. One thing before we get into the Shadows Over Innistrad Remastered stuff is we did have our preview card go up last night, and usually we have to wait till the next week, but it worked out timing wise. So let's talk about that. So this is our preview card for March of the Machines, and it's really sick, actually. Like, we got an awesome one. It's called Hidetsugu and Kairi, and it is 2 blue, black for a 5/4 flying legendary ogre demon dragon at rare.
There we go. So
we got a Dimir dragon somehow. This is like the coolest preview card we've probably ever gotten. And it's 5/4 flying for 5 mana. And it says, when it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library. And so that's Brainstorm. So that's pretty insane. You put them in any order, of course. And then it has, when it dies, exile the top card of your library. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So it gives you, first off, just bread and butter, right? It's 5 mana, 5/4 flyer that draws you a card with card selection built in as well. So we're already talking about premium territory here. I think anything that has flying for toughness for 5 mana that draws you a card, like in any way, this one actually does a pretty good, like it lets you actually see some cards and manipulate your library a little bit. But anything that just like gives you some version of draw you a card would be an A, right? Like, it's tough to die after the turn you cast this. Like, you do have this huge flyer that they have to get through. If it had reach, it would be similar, right? Because I'm always thinking when we get up into the A range in terms of like stabilizing a board or helping you come back. But this meets that definition for me. So, that's amazing. But then there's this really cool like sub game, right? Of, let's say your opponent looks down and like, well, I do have a removal spell. It's like, well, when do you use it? Do you wait for both of the cards that the person put there to clear off? Like, is there a mind game there about where you put, I'll put the good one on top. And, of course, it also makes you assess the board, right? If they have lethal, they may be like, well, I'm just going to kill it and hope you didn't have a good sorcery instant to put there. And that doesn't kill me. And that thing doesn't kill my creature, which takes away lethal. I mean, there's a lot of really cool like gamesmanship around this card.
And of course, if you can sacrifice it in some way, then you can just do the thing, without even counting on your opponent.
Totally. And if you have there's probably some really broken stuff you could do and construct it, right?
Time warp effects or something like that.
Or just I'm thinking bigger, like, I don't know, give me an 8 mana something,
Okay, time stretch.
Time stretch, sure. Or Opus or, something, that wins you the game on the spot where, because if you had it in your hand when you cast Hidetsugu and Kairi, then you can put it on top and then immediately sack it if you have a sack out. Anyway, this card is extremely awesome. So are you stoked on it, or what's your take?
I'm just glad that Paul decided to give us a nice card. I got to thank him. Thanks to Wizards of the Coast and Paul Cheatham specifically for giving us a sweet card.
Yeah, so that was a great one. All right, let's talk about Shadows.
Yeah, so first things first, I wanted to do some quick hits on Sealed. I put together some sealed decks on Draft Sim. I did note that it had the previous week's rotation of cards, but that's okay. I wasn't really like
It
looking
had
to
the
go
tribal.
like, yeah, super deep, because I have played sealed with Shadows and Eldritch Moon, and basically this format, and this hasn't changed from before to now, has very linear themes. These themes demand a lot of work: delirium, madness, tribal, right? So in sealed, you're not going to end up on those themes very often. Like you're not going to have a dedicated Vampire's Madness deck. You're not going to have a very dedicated like blue-red spells deck. That's just not really possible. That's not to say that you're not going to have 3 discard outlets and 2 madness spells, and they're going to combine nicely when they come up. Like Olivia's Dragoons and Weirded Vampire are both going to go in the same deck and be pretty good. But it is the sort of thing where you end up not playing the same as when you were playing Draft, and it goes out the window that everything's super synergistic and you have to have every card have a place. Now we're much more back in the like, you're playing your bombs, you're playing a good removal, you're having like a not embarrassing curve, and you're just trying to get their own card power as opposed to just synergy, even if there's still micro synergies around.
Do you put these cards on a different scale then? Like, for example, if you have a Delirium card and you're in a dedicated Delirium deck, you're kind of putting it in your deck thinking, I'm going to have Delirium a good chunk of the time, and that's why I'm playing the card. If you play a Madness card, right, and it's really not great on the front side, but if you Madness it, it's quite strong. If you put it into a Madness deck, you're thinking, well, I'm going to be Madnessing this thing a good chunk of the time. Here, you have to make the adjustment down. Do you not play those? Like the cards that, if you assume a good percentage of the time, you're just casting it for its straight up cost, or you're playing it without Delirium, are you putting that through that filter every time?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is like, I'm going to put Gnarlwood Dryad in my deck either way. It's green for a 1/1 death touch. That's just an efficient creature. And if I get Delirium on turn 7 some of the time, I'm going to consider that a bonus. I'm not gonna put a bunch of cards that have to have Delirium in order to work, like you said, because that I don't think is a good strategy.
Okay, so keep that in mind when you're building your decks. That, and unless you get lucky and have a synergistic deck, generally you won't. So you should be looking at the cards at face value, and that can be tough. Also,
between the uncommon duels and the ones that have been shifted down to uncommon from rare, Terrarian and whatnot, there is a lot of room for like 3-color-ish decks.
Yeah, I've been actually splashing a fair bit, even in Booster Draft. So, when it comes to sealed, I assume I'll be more willing to do that. Terrarian's a particularly interesting one because it does give you the double hit. So, if you get 2 of them, you may actually be able to splash for a double color card or something like that if you're willing to save it, like if you don't have anything else to do with it. I know that, a lot of the time, Terrarian can serve multiple purposes. For example, I've been playing it alongside, what's it called? Angelic whatever, the 2 and a white, where you have to sack
Angelic Purge.
Where you have to sack
the card that you didn't believe me was good, but is good.
It's very good. Yeah. But I support it. You know what I mean? Like I'll sack a clue to it, or I'll sack the Terrarian is the ideal because you still get the card. You don't get the fixing, but you get the card out of the deal.
Yeah.
And that just feels like you're getting away
with
something.
Or you sack a land to get your Delirium going. But that can happen. There's a lot there. So when it comes to sealed, I think that you can kind of approach it as a normal-ish sealed format. And if there's an opportunity for synergy, great, go ahead and take it. But this is a pretty big departure from the Draft format because these themes are not nearly as well supported in sealed as they would be in Draft.
Right. What about the new cards this week?
So the new cards this week, it's Fatal Flashback, and the most impactful cards are things like Faithless Looting, Feeling of Dread, Forbidden Alchemy, Gnaw to the Bone, Lingering Souls continues to be fantastic. Mystic Retrieval.
Oh, okay.
So that one is 3 and a blue sorcery. Return an instant sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Flashback of 2 and a red. It makes the blue-red spells deck a lot better. And then Spider Spawning and Silent Departure. So Spider Spawning is the 4 and a green, make a 1/2 spider for every creature in your graveyard with flashback of 6 and a black. And Silent Departure's blue sorcery, bounce target creature, flashback 4 and a blue. Really efficient card. Like the front end is strong, and then the back end is very strong. But the main effects this has had is that it takes some away from the tribal decks because all the tribal lords rotated out and Butcher's Cleaver. Mm-hmm. And it's added a lot to both the Delirium spawning kind of Sultai deck that now gets Knot of the Bone and Spider spawning, which are just complete engines. Knot of the Bone, by the way, is 2 and a green instant. Gain 2 life for every creature in your graveyard. Flashback 2 and a green. So what'll happen is like they'll beat you down a bunch. You'll gain 12 off Knot, then you flash it back, and all of a sudden like you're unkillable.
You have tons of time, yeah.
Right, and the 2 decks I've been drafting the most are blue-red spells, which we're going to talk about, and Sultai Delirium, which we're also going to talk about. You've been drafting a lot of blue-green clues, which you're going to talk about.
That's right. Travel preps?
Travel prep is very good.
Yeah.
This is 1 and a green sorcery, put 2 +1/+1, or put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 target creatures, flashback 1 and a white. So green-white humans actually, I think, probably came out ahead because travel prep was better than anything they lost.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. It does feel like it's not quite like in Innistrad, it was like arguably the best card, even though there was a bunch of other cool stuff going on. It doesn't feel quite that level because things have been shifted around and stuff, but it's really strong. It's just, It's deceptively strong. Just when you just curve with this, it's just like, really? Like it adds so much power and toughness to the board, and it does it right now.
So the deck that I've enjoyed the most is blue-red spells. It's really fun. And what this deck does is it combines the fact that there's a ton of cheap removal, cheap bounce, and card draw, and you can just build it, and like recursion, and you can just build a deck that's just like bounce your thing, kill your thing, bounce your thing, kill your thing, draw a bunch of cards until you win the game. And the way you win is actually important. I have actually lost games where I just got decked because they answered my win conditions. So the best win condition I found is Rise from the Tides. That's the 5 and a blue sorcery, makes a 2/2 tapped zombie for each spell in your graveyard, each instant or sorcery. It is tapped, so you do have to survive the turn you play it. Mm-hmm. But this makes like 5 to 10 zombies, and you don't usually have to even go more than that. Like I've had decks that could have probably slow rolled it till I got 15 zombies, but like you don't need to do that. Like 9 zombies is usually enough to win the game too. Mm-hmm. This one is vulnerable to like Wraths or Sever the Bloodline. There's a couple cards that do stop you, but for the most part, 1 Rise is enough to kill them. And when they kill all your zombies with one of those sweeper type cards, Mystic Retrieval and Shreds of Sanity, there's 2 uncommon ways to get instants and sorceries back from your graveyard. So honestly, you can have a deck that has 1 Rise, 1 Mystic Retrieval, and the rest interaction and card draw, and that's totally legit. Like,
that's sweet.
You run the slight risk of like ending up in a spot where Rise is your last card or something, but even when it's your second to last card, a lot of the time you'll be fine. And
so don't scry it to the bottom.
Probably don't scry it to the bottom. Yeah, that would generally be good. Past Rise, you can also play like an emerge package of creatures. That is reasonable, where you have like an Exultant Cultist or 2 and like a Drownyard Explorers, and then you have like the Drownyard Behemoth or whatever, the 5/6 flash, or any of the like kind of big emerge creatures. Or you could end up with something like a Bedlam Reveler. One of the things that I actually discovered from drafting this deck a bunch, I think I've drafted this deck like 5 or 6 times now, is things like Mercurial Geists and Ingenious Scob. You'd think, oh yeah, this is the creature you want for this deck. These like 1/3 flying that gets +3/+0 when you play a spell, or 2/3 prowess. I kind of would rather have 0 creatures in my deck if I can get there. Because what I found happens is you play your Mercurial Geists, and then they just kill it because they have a bunch of removal in their hand.
They're
so powerful,
overjoyed that you've given them a target. Yeah,
it's so powerful if you can get down to actual 0 good targets for removal. And I don't count Exultant Cultist in that, because if they want to kill my 3-mana 2/2 that draws me a card that dies, that's fine. Yeah. But that's why Rise is really important. Another one that I found, it's a mythic, but you get past it, people don't tend to take it, is Mind's Dilation, the 5 blue enchantment. So it's 5 blue, it's an enchantment. Whenever your opponent plays their first spell in a turn, exile their top card. If it's a non-land, you can cast it for free.
You get it.
Yeah, like you play it without paying its mana cost right then. And this does 2 things. One is that, you get a spell every turn if if they're playing something, and if they're not playing anything, that's usually fine. The other is that it actually does exile a card from the top of their deck no matter what. So you can actually deck them in some cases if you're both getting low on cards, because it means every time they play their first spell, they lose a card off the top of their deck. Fevered Visions is actually a bomb in the deck. This is the one blue red enchantment that at the end of your turn you draw a card. At the end of each player's turn they draw a card, but your opponent also takes 2 damage if they have 4 or more cards in hand. When you go Fevered Visions and just have a bunch of bounce spells and removal spells afterwards,
so
and then
annoying.
It's just so good. Yeah. One thing that I've splashed a bunch in this deck, you might not be immediately obvious, is a Feeling of Dread. So this is the 1 and a white instant, tap 2 creatures, flashback 1 and a blue. And what you end up doing is you play this card maybe with like a land or 2 to play the front side, but if you have a bunch of discard outlets, which this deck tends to have like a madness package, you just get to discard this or mill it with pieces of the puzzle. And then it's just really effective at keeping your opponent from killing you, tapping down 2 of their creatures and then letting you have time to deal with their other stuff.
It's Time Walk.
Yeah, I mean, it actually can play like that. Like when you get to 8 mana, you go Rise from the Tides, flashback, Feeling of Dread, tap your 2 creatures, attack you with Rise. I mean, that is a really good sequence. And if you can kind of get there, it's pretty cool.
What are the other ways to get it into my yard?
There's Pieces of the Puzzle. That's the 2 and a blue sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards. Put 2 instant or sorceries in your hand, the rest in your graveyard. You just take the other cards. There's Faithless Looting and Tormenting Voice. Pour over the pages. There's also like, ideally you get a duel or 2. I've had a deck where I had like 2 of the red-white lands, and I just played those 2 in my with all islands and mountains, and then most games I'd end up with like 1 of those in play, and I could just cast the card.
That is sweet. Yeah, that's really nice.
It's really cool, and the deck plays out. It's a lot of fun. And this is what I'm talking about when we say like every card in your deck works towards this goal. Like this is much more on that page. And as you talk about the Clues deck or you talk about the Delirium deck, that's kind of this format. And getting to the point where you're like not putting, Ravenous Bloodseeker in your blue-red spells deck as a discard outlet because it just does not advance your game plan really, that's going to help you win a lot more.
Yeah, and I think in a general sense we'll see this especially for the decks that we're talking about today, because they are some of the most synergy-based decks, but the further you push it, the better it is. Like the synergies, right? The more you go towards leaning into the theme, the better you are, which is really cool. I mean, that's kind of where you want to be in draft format. Yeah, I mean,
so the real key cards for the deck are like the cheap commons, Silent Departure, Galvanic Bombardment. That's like the shock that gets +1 damage for each copy that's in your graveyard. Incendiary Flow, the sorcery, 1 and a red, deal 3 to any target, including your opponent. And it exiles creatures that it kills. Drag Under, the 2 and a blue, bounce, draw a card. Take Inventory, I really like. That's the 1 and a blue, draw a card. Then draw another card for every take inventory in your graveyard. And basically, if you can have a really low curve of all these cards, you're gonna do pretty well. You do need eventually a win condition, and Rise is the best one. And I've had decks that struggle a bit when they don't get one. But honestly, you can still play towards this deck if you take if you take Fiery Temper, then you take Drag Under, and then you take Faithless Looting, and then you take Alchemist Greeting, like you'll usually find a way to kill them. And if you have to go a little lighter and just play like 6 creatures, that's fine too. Like you don't need to be 0. The thing I'd caution you against, it's really bad to play like 2 creatures. To play 2 Mercurial Geists and 21 spells, I would rather play like 5 or 6 creatures, 7 creatures, and like 14 spells, or play 23 spells, 0 creatures. Because if you play a few creatures, like just like 1 or 2 every game, your opponent's probably going to kill them all. Yeah. When you play your 3rd or 4th creature, they might run out of spells because you're drawing a lot more cards than they are.
We talking like Pyre Hounds and stuff if you do play the 6/7 creature version? Like
Pyre Hound's fine. The kind of like Emerge package I've found to be pretty good, because what you do is you play, like I said, Exultant Cultist and Drownyard Explorers. These are the 3 mana 2/2 that dies, draw a card, and 4 mana 2/4 that makes a clue. You don't care if those get killed. If they don't kill them because they're not very juicy targets, you get to emerge something out of them. And then even if that doesn't happen, at some point you get to the point you're just casting your emerge creatures. Like you do get to that much mana.
And then the other question is, where do counter spells fit into this archetype?
I haven't liked them because the counter spells in the format is Deny Existence, which is counter target creature and exile it, and Convolute, which counters unless they pay 4. Like you can play those cards, but I just haven't found them to be that impressive. Honestly, if there was cancel, 1 blue counter target spell, I think I would actually like that card in the deck, but I don't really like those soft counters because the game goes long, and when you draw one of those on turn 10, they're kind of weak.
They're kind of weak, yeah. Because and the key cards that you listed are all reactionary, right? Like they either slow down or kill your opponent's stuff, right? Silent Departure, Galvanic Bombardment, Incendiary Flow, Drag, Undertake, Inventory, draw card at the end there, and everything else is like bounce or deal with your opponent's threat either temporarily or permanently. You ever burn people out with this deck? Like, can you chain together incendiary flows and some, I guess maybe in the 6 to 7 creature version, you could do something like that?
Yeah. When I had a double Fevered Visions deck, and that deck was great.
That is a way to burn somebody out.
And I did end up where once the Fevered Visions had got them to 10, and I was just like Incendiary Flow, Mystic Retrieval, Incendiary Flow, Mystic Retrieval, Incendiary Flow, and kind of got them that way.
Your move, yeah, definitely. That's cool.
But most of the time, you don't end up doing that now.
Okay. And is
one
this
exception is there's a rare Devil's Play, X in a red, deal X to any target, flashback, X red, red, red. That one's great in this deck too, because you can use it early to kill something if you need to, or you just do all your stuff, and then you're like, all right, Devil's Play you for 9, go. And then, a couple turns later, flash it back. Like that can definitely happen.
Is this your favorite archetype?
Oh yeah. It's so fun.
Okay. What about Sultai Delirium?
So this one's trickier. And again, I had a couple false starts with this deck, though I think I've kind of cracked it at this point, but I would not draft this deck, like in the Arena Open unless you've drafted it a couple times first, because basically what you're trying to do with this deck is you've got a couple main things going on. One, you have Delirium, and you have Obsessive Skinner and Gnarlwood Dryad, which pay you off pretty nicely. Manic Scribe is another one. So Gnarlwood Dryad is a 1-mana 1/1 death touch that gets +2/+2 with Delirium. That one rewards you for early Delirium, and because it's a 3/3 death touch, it's pretty burly. The Skinner's a 1 and a green 1/1 that puts a +1/+1 counter on ETB, but if you have Delirium, it also does it on their upkeep every turn. So, and you can put it anywhere. So you play this and usually put the counter somewhere else because they already want to kill the Skinner pretty badly. And then Manic Scribe is the 1 and a blue 0/3 that ETB mills them for 3, and on their upkeep, if you have Delirium, mills them for 3 every turn. And this is a great win condition. So you got Delirium, and that's like one part of it. The other part you have is Spider Spawning and Knot of the Bone, both of which care about how many creatures you have in your graveyard. And so both Delirium and Spider Spawning, it's obviously like synergy, right? They both care about having the correct things in your graveyard. So they both are getting enabled by the same cards, which is why these cards kind of combine to make this deck. Mm-hmm. If you can spend a bunch of the thing is you spend a bunch of time like casting Forbidden Alchemy and Grapple with the Past and Laboratory Brute, that's the 3 and a blue 3/3 that mills you for 4. And you fall behind because some of these don't even affect the board, like Alchemy or Grapple, right? These are like the Alchemy is the 2 and a blue, look at the top 4, put 1 in the hand, rest in the graveyard. Grapple mills you for 3, then you return a land or creature. But you make up for that because you cast Knot of the Bone and you gain 12 life or 14 life. Or you cast a Spider Spawning for 6 spiders. And 1/2 reach in multiples is actually incredibly hard to deal with.
Impossible to get through.
Just your opponent attacks you with a 5/5. You block with 5 of these. They kill 2 of them.
Yeah, it's
Isn't
incredible.
That ridiculous? A 1/2 is
incredible.
So annoying.
Yeah, and because it's interesting that you mentioned the Spider Spawning. Specifically because, for old school players like us, when we think about it, we think about the deck in Innistrad that let you like loop it sort of indefinitely. But you're just saying just casting it and flashing it back is like plenty good.
Yeah, you do have a loop. I'll get to that. But it is not. This is not like the old Spider Spawning decks that were using Mystic Retrieval and Memories of the Past or whatever to full loop. Here you've got your boy. I know you like this one too, Epitaph Golem. This is the 5 mana.
I'll be mentioning that one.
5 mana 3/5, and you pay 2 to put a card on the bottom of your deck, and really important to keep you from decking. But so what you're trying to do is you're trying to mill yourself a bunch and then play all these cards that take advantage of that. Here are the challenges, and here's what I kind of struggled with. One, you have to have a high creature count because Grapple and Spider Spawning, if you have 2 creatures in your graveyard in the middle of the game, or just not Grapple, non-Spider Spawning. If you have 2 creatures, they're not impressive. Mm-hmm. The other thing is for Delirium, you need a lot of different types.
Yeah.
And so what I've kind of found the sweet spot is, first of all, Epitaph Golem and Wildfield Scarecrow are 2 artifact creatures which count as artifacts for Delirium, as well as creatures, and creatures for spider spawning. Plus, you already want these 2 cards. The other thing you have is Terrarian. I really like having 1 or 2 Terrarians in my deck because this deck's also 3 colors. It's really got a lot pulling it in different directions.
This is an advanced
it deck. Is. But this morning I got 7 wins with an awesome version, and it is very much doable. The other thing is you want a couple instants. I found like 3 to 4 instants is good, and the instants you want are Grapple with the Past, Forbidden Alchemy, and that's basically it. Those are the instants. And Gnaw to the Bone, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then for sorceries, you want spider spawning, obviously. A bomb in the archetype is Seasons Past. It's a mythic. It's 4 green. Sorcery, return 1 card of each cost from your graveyard to your hand. So it's like a draw 5 to 7 in the middle of the game. And crucially, Seasons Past then goes on the bottom of your deck. So you can just get down to no cards and just cast this every turn. And then one thing that you might notice is missing is interaction. You're not playing a lot. So some of the interaction I've liked, Spontaneous Mutation is great. That's the enchantment for 1 blue mana. Flash gives a creature -X/-0, X number of cards in your graveyard. It's great because it's a 1 mana spell in this deck. Your graveyard's always big enough that their creature is just completely negated. And it's an enchantment. When you mill it, it's just an enchantment counting towards your types. Deadweight, if you're heavy enough black, similar things going on. But honestly, Spontaneous Mutation is better, and the deck is usually blue-green splash black. So I really like that. And then flashback cards in general are strong. I do like Silent Departure. It's I think uncommon in this, or it's on the bonus sheet, but Sever the Bloodline is 3 in a black sorcery, exile all creatures with the same name as the target, and flashback 5 black. So really strong card to begin with, and it has flashback. And here's the thing that really made these decks start working for me. It sounds silly. I just realized Laboratory Brute was a great card for the deck.
Oh, okay.
That's the 3 in a blue, 3/3 that mill you for 4. Because when I was drafting this deck last week before the changes, I would never put this card in my deck because 4 mana 3/3 is just not a good card, and milling yourself for 4 was not as good as casting something like Grapple or using Vessel of Nascency. But this is a self-mill card and a creature. It does exactly what this deck wants, and now I've started playing like 3 of them in my deck, and the decks have started working much better. So
the Mill Giant.
Yeah. And then so the creatures you want are like Gnarlwood Dryad, Obsessive Skinner, Laboratory Brute. The Ovenwald Captive, the 2 mana 1/2 that taps for a green is pretty solid. Epitaph Golem. And the spells I already mentioned, like Grapple, Alchemy, Gnaw, Spider Spawning. What this deck does to make up for the fact that it really doesn't have room for a bunch of removal spells in the deck, its interaction, in quotes, is Gnaw to the Bone and Spider Spawning. If you have those cards, like when you gain 16 life and then put 8 spiders into play, it doesn't matter that you couldn't kill their 2/2 flyer because you've negated it. So there are some good rares for the deck, like Joralf's Masterpiece, the 3 blue 7/7 that gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand that you can play out of your graveyard for 3 in a blue and discard 3 cards. Great card because you just mill it, and at some point in the game, you just toss 3 land to it. Groundskeeper is the 1 mana 1/1 that returns a basic for 1 and a green from your graveyard to your hand.
I've had people kill my Groundskeepers a lot. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
And then, of course, Epitaph Golem. And you have to balance all these things. When you do, here's what you get. You get a deck that has an unbeatable late game because you're just recurring your entire deck basically at will with Epitaph Golem, which has all this backup because you're playing a couple copies of Grapple. So if they kill your Epitaph Golem, you can just get it back. And then the Epitaph Golem puts Grapple on the bottom, and what are they going to do? Kill your Golem again? Right. So sometimes if the deck's good enough, I'll play 2 Golems because you don't want to risk one of them getting exiled or something.
That's true. And you're getting the double type bonus off of it in that deck, like you mentioned before. So it's actually pretty okay. Yeah.
You can kill them just with whatever. Manic Scribe is a really good win condition. That's the 03 that mills because you just at some point they have 20 cards in their deck and you just play this and they're on a 3 or 4 turn clock if you have any support, or
when
just
does it
5
mill?
Turn clock.
Like ETB
on their upkeep. ETB and on their upkeep. So if they have 18 cards left, you're like, play this, mill to 15, upkeep, mill to 12, and now they're 3 turns away because they draw a card every turn.
Right.
And that's a fast clock. So again, you got to practice, and this is one of those decks that if you're like missing missing Grapples or Gnaws or Spider Spawnings, it really impacts how the deck plays out, and you have to make some pretty serious adjustments. So again, this is an expert level deck. It took me a while to get the hang of it. I think it's very good. I will draft in the Arena Open if I have the opportunity to do so, but it's to the point where if you're not confident with this deck, I would pass on the spider spawning and take a tribal preparations and just go for green white or something. Like the blue red spells deck, I don't think is that complicated. You're just playing all the card draw and bounce and removal you can, right?
Right.
The key with the blue red spells deck is the creature count thing, which I mentioned. The key with the Delirium deck is understanding exactly how every piece works. So that's a little harder.
That's a lot harder. Yeah. What I am curious, if you drafted the deck, let's say that you got a solid version, a B plus version, except for never saw a spider spawn, never had a chance to take one. What does the end game look like if you don't get a spider spawning?
So spider spawning is at its core a defensive card. Like, yes, you can kill them with the spawning, but that's secondary to just making it so you don't die. If you had a deck that had all the pieces you wanted and no spawning, you could get away with like 2 copies of Knot of the Bone where you're just like, gain 16, flashback, gain 16. That buys me a few turns to play some more stuff and then do it again.
Okay. And then you're just overwhelming your opponent with what, flashback cards, value from the yard? Like, what's the...
You're getting down to no cards and just using Epitaph Golem to recur whatever your best cards are every turn. Because, I mean, you're still going to have like random good rares or big creatures in the deck. The emerge cards, like a Wretched Griff, I actually like a lot because I'm playing a bunch of Laboratory Brutes. It's a good way to get some additional value out of it.
Yeah, that's sweet. Okay, yeah, that has to be the sweetest deck. For sure. I've touched on like corners of that, but have never had the full on, and I will for sure.
I mean, one of the great parts about that deck is your opponent plays against you and you are not playing a normal game of Magic. Right. You don't care if they kill your creatures. You're not doing anything. You're just sitting there decking yourself and they're like, what is going on? What is happening? It's like you're someone's like throwing a bunch of pillows at you and you're sitting there with like a gun and you're like, I can't shoot the pillows. That doesn't do anything. Like, What am I supposed to do in this situation? They're like, I've got removal and combat tricks and I'm ready to roll. And you're just like, okay, but I'm going to do this really weird thing instead.
Do you remember Armored Scob?
Yeah, the 3-mana 1/4.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that guy in this deck. But
I mean, that's like the super version of Laboratory Brute, but Laboratory Brute's still good enough, and that's what I had to get over, and that really kicked it up a notch, as it were.
All right, so the deck that I've been drafting the most and having success with as well has been Blue-Green Clues. And this is a supported archetype. The deck has a bunch of payoffs. And speaking of the payoffs, that's actually the most important thing about this deck is you will find quite quickly that making clues is not the bottleneck. It is taking advantage of them. There are many games that will end with you having 8 clues on the battlefield. The clues is not the hard part. If you draft these 2 colors and take cards that say investigate or clue on them, you're already probably going to be able to make clues. The issue comes in with what are you doing with them? And there's 2 main factors that come up with that. One of them is that clues are slow. They are mana intensive. They take a long time for you to realize your advantage that you've gained as a result of having accrued these clues. So that means that you need time. So that means you need to slow down your opponent and or gain life to be able to take advantage of the clues. So that's one thing. The other thing is that clues in and of themselves are powerful in the sense that you are generating card advantage, and that will usually lead to a win. But this deck can hum along at a much quicker pace than that and a much more powerful one because there are payoffs that give you things for generating and or sacrificing clues. So the ones that are the most important are Ovenwald Mysteries. That's the 2 and a green. And when you sack a clue, you get a 1/1. And whenever one of your non-token creatures dies, you get a clue. That happens all the time. And it's one of the ways that you can build out a board. It's not like spider spawning in the sense that like the spawning creatures are really excellent at what they're doing. But these are pretty good. 1/1s, can chump block. They can gang block. They can make a big board and attack. And it can be a win condition on its own. And then the other key enchantment is Ongoing Investigation. And this one gives you kind of the best of both worlds. It generates clues, but it also gains you life. It lets you pay, it's 1 and a blue, and it lets you pay 1 and a green to exile creatures from your yard to turn them into clues and gain 2 life. And then there's kind of the other end of the spectrum, which is Graph Mole. That's the 2 and a green 2/4. And when you sack a clue, you gain 3 life. That thing gains huge amounts of life. And it is It is the type of card that's so important for the archetype that if you can afford to not run it out on turn 3 and wait until you can play it and sacrifice a clue, you often want to do that to at least get something out of it, because they will kill it. If your opponent's trying to kill you with creatures in any meaningful way, they will kill that as fast as possible. The good news is it's very difficult to kill. It has 4 freaking toughness on a 3-mana creature. So if you need to run it out there and block or whatever, you can do so. But that card can absolutely take over late, because what will happen is you'll exchange resources a lot in the early stages, and then you'll find the dust kind of settles and you've got a bunch of clues, but they're usually a bit ahead of you on board or on life total. And then you play Grafmole and start sacrificing clues, and it's like an avalanche. Like your life total spiking upwards, your hand size is growing, and boom, within 2 turns, you've stabilized your life total and you're way ahead on cards as well. And Grafmole is kind of the thing that does that. There's also really good support cards too. My favorite one is Erdwald Illuminator. That's the 1 in a blue 1/3 flyer, and it says whenever you make a clue for the first time each turn, you make an additional clue. I don't have it on the list with Mysteries, Grafmole, and Investigation because it does, it only aids in bettering what you were already doing. It has that similar, I wouldn't go as far as to call it win more, but it is not.
It's a bit the rich get richer.
It is a little the rich get richer, right? But it does turbo you out. Like you do occasionally have those draws where you have the ability to make a clue, but like maybe you haven't found one of your enchantments or something. You have like a Byway Courier, which of course is a card that you're going to play a lot. That's the 2 and a green 3/2. When it dies, you investigate, and it turns trading that off if you have Illuminator out into, okay, I'm good on clues now. Like I've got 2 clues and they feed each other. Mm-hmm.
My experience with the deck is past a certain point, you basically have an emblem of 2 mana draw a card.
Yeah, it feels like that. It really does.
You really do. And that's why I think Grafmole is the most important of these cards, because it's the one that makes that emblem busted. Whereas in a normal game, you spent some effort getting all those clues. You don't really have the time to crack all of them unless you're, like you said, doing stuff that keeps you alive.
Exactly. And, there's the clue making comes from mainly commons, right? Byway Courier, Drownyard Explorers, Jace's Scrutiny, Weirding Wood. These things just spew clues all over the battlefield. And so they're all fine and you can play them, but Courier's the best of the bunch. But as we mentioned, you'll often win or in some cases die with multiple clues on the battlefield, like 6 of them just sitting there. And so what ends up happening when you get to that point is you realize 2 things that are making you a little bit nervous. One is your life total, and that's why Grafmole is so important, as well as Ongoing Investigation, as they both play to the core of the deck, but also gain you significant life. Again, Grafmole being the all-star there. But then the other thing is you're going to start doing library checks. You're going to be did I, what am I looking at here? Because, there are numerous cards that are meant to effectively trade off either card for card or some short-term advantage like Jace's Scrutiny, and then leave behind a clue. But your deck is filled with those, right? If your deck was all Jace's Scrutinies, you'd never win. You would just deck yourself at some point, right? And so, but they're all on some type of spectrum around that. But when you're drawing Jace's Scrutinies off of your clues, you're like, okay, well, I need to get something that actually pushes me forward at some point, which does happen thanks to cards like Ulvenwald Mysteries. But you will start looking at your library and wondering, am I going to get decked? And you'll get close and it'll happen all the time. And this is where Epitaph Golem, my boy, comes in. Luis and I were texting about this earlier. Maybe we're on the phone. I can't remember. But you sometimes need to save it so that you can play it and activate it once or twice, because you can't risk exposing it to removal. Because
that's why you got to go for the second Epitaph Golem.
Exactly,
you got to have the backup.
Yeah. Also, I just have to say, just like as a hallmark, anytime Epitaph Golem is good in a format or needed in a format because of its activated ability, I'm in. Like the format is good. I'm happy. Like this is where I want to be. And it is a sharp contrast to what we had in 1, right? It was that kind of card would be just laughed out of the building. And here it's like, there's 2 decks now that we're like, you know what? It actually fits. And it interestingly fits for slightly different reasons into both of the last lists that we've done as well. How does your game plan play out? You're basically putting a bunch of speed bumps in front of your opponent. You're going to slow them down with your creatures like the Courier or the Drownyard Explorers. They will trade off things for them, either creatures, combat tricks, removals, whatever. You don't really care as long as you have the clues left over. you can use cards like Jace's Scrutiny or now Silent Departure and stuff to just keep your opponent off balance. That's all you need to do. Just speed bumps. It's not about crushing them with your amazing removal. It's not about having some insane board state. It's just about saying you're going to have to make a trade-off. And every time your Byway Courier trades for anything, I don't care if it's a combat trick, a creature, anything on the other side, a removal spell, you're incrementally getting ahead. And this is how almost all the cards in the deck work, is that you are generating future advantage via clues. But you always have to keep in mind that they can still kill you before. I mean, there are times where you're like, all right, here's my big turn. You don't have a Graph Mull and you go crack a clue. I have 6 mana, didn't find something, crack a clue. And they're like, hit you for 7. And you're like, well, now I'm just too far behind. So the life total aspect and then later on the not getting decked are the things that you need to make sure you cover your bases on. Otherwise the deck's just sweet. I mean, anytime you have that many resources laying around, it's great. It feels good and it's really fun to play as well. The other thing that I've been doing is I have been splashing. I have been playing Weirding Wood, which was kind of on the like lower fringe for me, but I'm like, you know what? Making clues is good in this deck. And it turns out splashing's pretty good too. The 2 colors I splash the most, it's blue-green base, are white or red. Red because you can get really great removal spells. Incendiary Flow is particularly good. You know, Galvanic, whatever, Bombardment or whatever it's called. You don't need that so early because you're splashing, but even a later game Incendiary Flow can be really, really good. Or white for similar stuff. Angelic Purge, as I mentioned, you have a lot of clues floating around. So Angelic Purge ends up being really just exile something, and that's really, really powerful to have that, especially with how flexible it is. And then, you know, you'll get some Bomb Angel or something like that you can splash in and get. And then, yes, I will also splash for Thraben Inspector. Like the GOAT 1-drop, you know, I will put that in my deck because it doesn't matter when you draw it. And anything like, can you imagine a better card, right? What did I say? I said, you want to generate clues and you want to make speed bumps. It's like Thraben Inspector, everybody, like welcome to the party, right? So that's your guy. And the fact that it's so cheap and produces a clue means that, you know, even in the late game, you could just play it and sacrifice the clue like right away to get your Graph Mull going, to get your mysteries, your ongoing investigation, etc. So love this deck, by the way. It's super, super fun because it has tension, right? You are doing all the things early, and then it's, did I set myself up enough to take advantage of them to actually get all the cards into my hand and then deploy them? And that's what makes this deck really fun.
I had a question. Do you like Confront the Unknown in the deck? The green, give a creature +1/+1, make a clue, give a creature +1/+1 for each clue you have.
No, I have not played it. My guess is that I'm undervaluing it. The last time that there was one, what was it? The one that you really liked that I didn't, but that gave +1/+1 for something. I can't remember, but it ended up being 5 +5.
Oh, Gaia's Might.
Gaia's Might, right? You know, that overperformed. And I mean, Jesus, if you give me a card that says it gets +8/+8, like how am I turning that down? That said, no, I have not been prioritizing it. I mean, a combat trick is the last thing you want in a deck like this. So it would have to be on that level of super powerful, but I've learned, you know, that my gut tells me, okay. And of course, you know, making a clue is obviously good too.
Yeah, I think that it's a cheap card that lets you spend a low amount of mana and trade up, especially in a deck that can make a bunch of clues. So I thought that there was a chance that you would like the card. But I've had okay success with it. Kind of the way I feel about Confront the Unknown is like, if you can build your deck so that you have the slots for it, it can be really good, but is not a card that is always going to be good in one of these kinds of decks.
Right. So, you know, I mean, it would be hard to imagine that it would be terrible just because it does the thing that it wants to do and then it has the upside. I mean, like one thing I would say is I don't think I'd ever play 2 of them.
Yeah, they do combine well though.
They do. That's true. You know, I guess what would the bar be? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is just worth it if, you know, especially if you're a little light on clue making, you know, I just haven't found that to be the case, you know, and I really want something that slows it down, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, It's not a removal spell. It's not a creature. It's not, I mean, it kind of is a card draw spell, but not really. There's a lot of times when you've got Old Mysteries and Ongoing Investigation in your deck, every non-creature spell you play is a pretty severe cost.
Right. You really do need to mind the creatures there too. But like I never play Gnawed of the Bone. I never play any of that stuff. I wouldn't be shocked if that had a reasonable fit here too, because it does fit like the creature sub theme with those two enchantments. And then also the fact that I said, like, I'm just trying to buy myself a bunch of time to crack these clues. You know, I could see that fitting in, but these decks are tight. Like all three archetypes that we mentioned, like you don't have wiggle room for spots that don't directly contribute to the primary theme. Like you can't, the bar for that has to be like a strong rare, right? Like something that really like demands your attention, some angel or something like that, where you're like, okay, I got to put this card in my deck. But even then you're like, you know, another Weirding Wood wouldn't be the worst, right? You're always looking
Right.
at these other, you know, random things that fill out the curve better. But anyway, I mean, we were talking before the show, Luis, and you were saying you were absolutely loving this format. I mean, look at the last three decks we just covered. These are like the three sweetest decks we've covered like in months.
Yeah, I mean, this is the format that plays to a lot of the things I like. And I got to say, when you remember, I don't know, a year ago or whenever, when you talked about like, what would it be like if they changed cards mid format or they tried to make it so things, you know, the mix up the format. It turns out alchemy is not a good way to do that because people don't want their 3/3 to all of a sudden be a 3/2 next week. That's not fun, right? It's like,
It's confusing.
they changed the format by adjusting what these cards do. I think that rotating out these like 12 to 15 cards, whatever it is, and rotating in a new set every week is so far like 2 out of 2 have been awesome.
Yes.
And yeah, I like this week more than last week. I'll probably like next week a little less than this week because this week has like the exact kind of cards I want. But next week we're getting a bunch of we're getting a bunch of sacrifice stuff. So sacrifice decks are going to be morbid and you know, we're getting like Zealous Conscripts and Gutter Grime and Murder of Crows and Selhoff Occultist and Skursdag High Priest, right? Like these are a bunch of cards that all key off morbid and sacrifice. And that's just going to change the texture of things in a way that I think is going to be really pleasing. So I don't know. This feels like the way that you can leverage the digital platform to have an engaging limited experience that changes week to week, but is also like, it's not an overwhelming change. Like, you know how sometimes, I mean, you do commentary, so you kind of run into this. Sometimes it's like, okay, our match ends, we're going to go into this other match, or they're sideboarding, so we're going to go into this other match. And all of a sudden you're pulled into this match and you're like, okay, there's like both players have 7 things in play. Let me figure out what's going on. I get access to both their hands. Oh man, this is an overwhelming amount of information.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately I have Cheon in the booth instead of Luis, so it's not going to take a little longer to break down. But
words I've never thought.
No, of course not. Paul is actually like just awesome. I think you guys are the best booth at the moment. But that's not what this format's like. It's not like next week we come back and we're like, oh my God, this is a completely new format. What do I do? I'm so lost. It's like, this is more like, hey, this is a complicated Magic game, but I was here from the beginning. And as things get added and subtracted, you don't have to reevaluate the whole board. I know some players who every turn evaluate the board from first principles, and that's why they play so slow and usually not as well because it's like so much information to process.
Right.
But if it's like a frog in boiling water where like, well, I was there when the first creature got played and then the second, then the third, and then the fourth. Now there's 7, but I built that step by step. It's kind of how this format feels where it's like, I know where we're at. Oh, we tweaked a knob, so now sacrifice is better than flashback. Okay, I can adjust accordingly, and it still takes a little bit of time to do that, and there's still this discovery moments, and that's obviously like a really fun part of it. But it's not like I don't know what's going on. This isn't 8 weeks of new formats or whatever it is.
Right, and there's also the fact that it's not that many cards, and they're all reprints, so there's at least a chance that you've come across some of them. You know, for us, we're familiar with all these cards, but even if you're not an old school player, maybe somebody played this in a Commander game, maybe, you know, somebody's cube has one of these cards. Oh, I remember that card, right? So it's not just a hit of fresh, like, mechanics, cards, pictures, you know, just things that you have to like fully process from scratch. They, you know, at least for a decent chunk of the player base, there's an on-ramp there too. I think they've really hit the sweet spot with it. And This is the set that made me realize how much I love the bonus sheet reprint stuff. We had the spells one from whatever set that was. We had the artifact ones from a recent set. And now we've got this rotating set of ones that fit into the archetypes, quite cleanly. And I'm like, I'm in. Like as far as I'm concerned, they can do this as much as they want. Like these have just all been really fun, cool additions that are interesting and let you do something wild every once in a while too. They'll put a few mythics in there to like give you something to aim for, but they come up so infrequently that it's not like a big part of the format, but you're like, oh wow, I actually got the whatever this one time and I'm going to go for it. And because these things do fit, right? This is an example where these cards fit really well because they were printed in either these formats or similar formats from the past. But, we've had ones that were from other formats that just happened to fit as well. What if they put Mizzix's Mastery or, stuff like that in here? You'd be, oh yeah, I can put that in my spells deck. And the one time you open up the Mastery, you go for it and you have the supercharged version of your spells deck or whatever. That type of stuff is really fun too, because it feels novel, right? And, at least for hardcore drafters like us, we're aware of that. We are looking to push that back, to the extent that we can. Okay, let's call it a show there, Luis. My mom's coming to visit, so I got to go take mom out to lunch. You can find us on social media, Marshall_LR and LSV, pretty much everywhere. You can find every episode of LR on lrcast.com. And if you're interested in the Patreon, it's patreon.com/limited resources. That's going to do it for this one. We will see you next week.
So I had someone on Twitter ask, is Paper Magic dead? Because we didn't cover Dominaria Remastered, but we did cover these online formats. And my short answer is no. Paper Limited is far from dead. But the slightly longer answer is, part of what you get when you listen to the podcast is you listen to how we're engaging with Magic. And we're at a point right now where we do the vast majority, in fact, basically all of our play online, whether that's on Arena or on Magic Online. I still do like paper cube drafts with the friends here, but we don't make it out to like Friday Night Magic. And that is going to mean that when there's like a paper only release that doesn't touch digital, again, like Dominaria Remastered, we're not that likely to cover it. That doesn't mean that Paper Magic or Paper Limited is not something that a lot of people enjoy. I mean, actually, my friends here go to Friday Night Magic over at Mind Goblin Games here in Denver, and it's they draft the current set a couple times by doing that, and they have a good time doing so. So I think that one thing to keep in mind is that my favorite way to play Magic in Play Limited is in paper, but it's at a big competitive tournament, and there's not as many opportunities for those as I would like. But I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, the Paper Limited is not something that you can engage in. Almost every city, of reasonable size is going to have a store that's going to want to run drafts of some kind. You can obviously make cubes or play with your friends. And there's nothing ever is going to replace cracking that pack and looking at what the rare is.
That's smell.
It's just not, that is not the sort of thing that's going to fade away into the night. As it turns out, it's easier for me to play Arena, so I play Arena, or play Magic Online. Same with you, but that is something that we play because of the ease of use, not because it is a superior experience. And I don't know. I love Magic cards. I have a lot of Magic cards. I still thumb through them, make decks, play with them. So I don't want anyone to be too worried about that, even if, of course, our perspective is going to be a little bit more on the digital focus.